Hello everyone, and welcome to this evening's webinar, your guide to contributing to the National Features and Documentary Series. My name is Danny of the CBAA. It's my pleasure to be here with you once again in the webinar room. Thanks so much to all of our early arrivals. We certainly hope you get a lot out of this evening's session. The National Features and Documentary Series gives new and emerging community radio producers the opportunity to make a radio feature for national distribution, receive mentoring from experienced producers and be paid for the work. All you need to do to enter is a great idea, and we'll discuss that more and more as we traverse throughout the world of webinars this afternoon. I do need to do a bit of housekeeping, let everyone know about upcoming webinars, including on Wednesday, 28th of March, 6:30, The Smell of an Oily Rag, 10 Tips for Broadcasting on a Budget, where broadcasters from around the nation will let us know how they're providing a quality service with limited resources. And then back again on Wednesday, 14th of March, 6:30 again. That's Australian Eastern Standard Time. I think Daylight Savings is going to be over by then. No, it's not going to be over by then, is it? No, still going to be happening. So that's Wednesday, 18th of April, rather. How to pitch your story to a national current affairs program. We're talking about the flagship national program for the community broadcasting sector since 2004, The Wire, a significant alternative voice in Australian current affairs. So much to get through tonight. Next slide, please, Andrew. I'm just going to give us a bit of a rundown as to the things that we'll be learning this evening. Here in this webinar, we're going to learn about the National Features and Documentary Series application process and selection criteria. We're going to get tips on effective storytelling for radio. We're going to learn how to pitch your story idea. And we're also going to hear the stories of previous producers. I'm very happy to be joined here in the CBAA offices from the Community Radio Network Operations Coordinator, Andrew McClellan. And when we're talking about stories of previous producers, we're talking Simon and Karen from The Pulse and Triple R respectively. Their shows, their pieces rather, Disconnected States and How Digital Changed Music, are still available to check out via the CBAA website. So if you haven't checked them out, please do so. But I think that's enough talking from me now. I believe, Andrew, I should hand the microphone over to you. Buddy, you're live.
Thanks so much, Danny. And hi, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well tonight. Thanks for joining. My name's Andrew. I'm the Operations Coordinator here at the Community Radio Network at the CBAA. In case you haven't heard of the Community Radio Network before, that's absolutely fine. That's not going to be on the test. We essentially a national live satellite distribution and syndication service, and we aggregate a lot of outstanding national radio from community broadcasters and producers all around Australia each week, and then redistribute that to a number of community broadcasters as well. So we do a lot of projects. We, of course, have our weekly run-in series, and I recognise a couple of names that in the attendees bar there that have worked with us before or have been in contact before, so it's good to see everyone. I thought I'd give an introduction to the National Features and Documentary Series in case you haven't heard too much about it before. It's one of the projects that we run here at the CRN with the CMTO, the Community Media Training Organisation, as a kind of special project throughout the year to produce some outstanding and wonderful content. So what is the National Features and Documentary Series? Well, it's a series that aims to encourage storytelling from new and emerging producers around Australia. And it's kind of suited to someone who has a great idea for a radio feature, but might need some help in planning and production side of things. And that's where the training and mentoring over the year comes into effect. So you're kind of assisted to take your idea from, a simple little embryonic stage into a full 26-minute piece of audio that you can happily share with friends, family, and be heard on community radio around Australia, if not further. It's best for people who know how to, who want to know how to bring elements of a feature together to tell a story successfully. And to do that, you are working with these mentors, and they're experienced producers they're producers that come from many different parts of the wider media landscape. In some cases, Walkley Award-winning mentors are part of the people who are recruited. It all kind of depends this year on where people are located, because we want to have the mentor quite close and face-to-face with you as much as possible. And they're, in effect, supervising producers, if you like. So they're the person that you're having a lot of contact time with. They're kind of taking you through everything. They're your sounding board, and they're giving you the advice, the things that you want to hear, the things that you don't want to hear but you need to hear, and they kind of take it with you step by step. So if you haven't already, check out some of the previous year entries at nfds.org.au, and that probably gives you a good idea of what the National Features and Documentary Series is and what it's done lately. But just keep in mind, as you're listening, these don't need to be indicative of what you need to put forward or what we even want to see necessarily in an application. Each year we get something that kind of comes at us in a sideways way, something that we haven't really thought of before as being something for this series. But it kind of pushes the boundaries, I suppose, of what we think of either a documentary or a feature as being able to do. Last year, for example, we had someone who proposed doing a reenactment piece, a historical reenactment, and it was really ambitious, but that's the way that they kind of tied in a lot of interview material and really got to the nuts and bolts of their topic. And it was actually quite successful and was a really good thing to hear. And it wasn't something, you know, reenactment wasn't something that we've really thought of before as being part of this series. Who's it open to? It's open to anyone who volunteers or is employed by an Australian community radio station. So you do need to have the endorsement of your station. So before you put your application in, make sure that you've just spoken with someone at your station. You also need to put their details down because we do need to get them to sign off on it, as essentially you are there with the representation of your station as you permit it. So if you're an independent broadcaster, just get in contact with us after this session, but you really do need to have that endorsement of your local community radio station. I also missed a little point there, but I should just note that we've been doing this since 2014, and it's all thanks to the financial assistance of the Community Broadcasting Foundation, to whom we're forever thankful. So you're going to, as successful applicants, receive industry standard radio training through the Community Media Training Organisation. They're the spearhead that kind of takes your embryonic idea to full feature documentary life, and that's worth approximately $1,000. So if you like, you're a producer who's receiving in effect $1,000 worth of free training to make that production and also to see it produced through a national service such as the Community Radio Network. There is an honorary payment that is paid per minute of supplied audio at the end. So you can probably do a bit of the math there, but essentially once you have completed the course and all audio and other associated materials have been successfully delivered to us and there's no outstanding issues that we need to resolve, there is payment at the completion of the course. One thing that is really needed to be stressed is that this does require a good amount of commitment and regular meetings with your mentor throughout the year. So the course kind of runs from the start of May until about the end of September. That's when you're submitting your final work. And the minimum that you need to be putting into this is really about 3 hours per week. Now, the reason for that is that there's a lot of material that needs to be covered. There needs to be a lot of evidence that kind of comes from yourselves as producers, kind of showing that these are the steps I'm taking. This is how much I'm researching. This is how dedicated to the task I am, so that I'm producing an ethically engaged piece of meaningful radio that really works with its topic and isn't kind of slapped together. This is really about producers stepping up their game, hearing from their mentors what they need to be looking at, and having it technically very tight as well. So I want to kind of just stress that minimum of 3 hours per week as well. As mentioned, there's also regular meetings with an allocated mentor. Depending on where people are located, it might be that we're happy to receive advice on, I'd really like this person at my station or this station to be mentoring me because they live in the local area and I will be able to meet up with them quite regularly. We do want to have quite a bit of face-to-face time with the mentor that you are teed up with, and there's a bit of budget for that as well. So if you are living in a remote area or your mentor is kind of not in the same local area as you, but it kind of comes to it that they're your mentor, there is a bit of budgeting so that there can be some travel and you should be able to meet up with your mentor. But at minimum, you know, you should be able to be on the phone with them every 2 weeks to 4 weeks, at least at the start of the year. A couple of little things that I missed there is there's also the chance here to win a CBAA award. So all the features are put into the CBAA's annual award ceremony for assessment, and the winner is named and is given a nice little trophy on the CBAA Awards Gala night, which happens at the CBAA conference in November. What are the selection criteria that we will be assessing applications against? And we will be going through the application soon. I can see there's quite a few questions popping up there. We'll get to that soon. The selection criteria are really straightforward in some respects. Thoroughness of planning demonstrated in the application. We want to see that, you know, you've really thought about your idea, you've thought about the topic, who you can speak with, who the people are that you might be wanting to interview, where you'll be going to get sound, where you'll be going to get specific things. So we do assess the applications where according to the amount of expertise, the amount of effort, and the amount of prior research and knowledge about your topic that you've already been able to demonstrate in your application. Don't be afraid of using dot points either. If you have a lot to say, it's better than a big, nice long paragraph that doesn't really say much at all. So feel free to put something in bullet point form. Originality of the idea of story. Obviously, if you're putting in an application that sounds exactly like something that we featured last year, we probably won't be able to look at it as favorably. We also need to, you can see the 5th point there, diversity of content across the series, need to keep that in mind as well. But there's also the fact that we regularly have the same topic come through on a number of different applications, and so we do have to only go, for example, if we have several applications on the legalization of marijuana in Australia, we might only be able to go with the strongest application there, even though these two applications are both quite strong. We are still creating a series for national distribution to stations, and we need to ensure that there's a diversity of content throughout the pieces that we submit. Potential for a creative use of sound. This could mean different things to many different people. Technically, it can be quite involved. Technically, it can be quite lax, but it's about the creative use of interviewing, of interview techniques. It can be a number of ways that you want to think about creative use of sound, but also what you want to get out of the course. So you can demonstrate that in your application as you answer the questions. This is what I kind of want to get out. This is what I want to do. This is what I have in mind, and I kind of need your help to achieve it. But you need to kind of tell us what you want to do before we can kind of start hearing it in our own heads. And suitability for national broadcast and distribution as a 26-minute piece. This is a point that can be a bit vexing to a couple of producers, but essentially, we're not looking for something that has necessarily the broadest mainstream appeal. That's not what this is about. This is still in the community radio sector where there's niche ideas, diversity of voices, people within their own voice kind of presenting their words and stories. What this is about is how niche the topic is, We don't want you to shy away from something that you think might only have relevance to only a couple of people. It might be that you're actually sharing that story of a couple of people, of a small community, to a wider audience. That's the significance of your documentary. That's why you're putting the pitch in. Your audience isn't a really limited scope. Think about how you can broaden that using the same story, using, from the same embryonic idea. I think at this stage, that's a bit about the National Features Documentary Series. We're going to go back through the application form shortly, but for the time being, we're just going to hear from a couple of experiences of the 2017 participants, and I think I'm going to pass this back to you, Danny.
Yes, you are going to pass it to me. I just had to turn my microphone on. Maybe I should apply for this. Obviously, I've got great command over the whole radio thing. Karina, are you there? I've just turned your microphone on.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, and I'm going to make you presenter as well. If you'll bear with me for 2 seconds, you'll hopefully get that showing up to you in just 1 second. And then you'll be good to go.
And showing my screen.
And there it is. The floor is yours.
Okay, excellent. So I did this last year and I absolutely couldn't recommend it highly enough. It's such an extraordinary opportunity. You just learn so much. And I think it's really exciting that from the very beginning, you've got an idea and you don't know how to do it. And you're just given these sort of really nice stepping stones where you're taught everything that you need. So I would have looked at this. This is my actual project here in front of you. And I would have looked at that and probably been a bit overwhelmed saying, oh, I don't even know what that is. And you're just given things in just the right order so that you really can learn how to produce something. So, you've got your sound effects here and you've got all these different, I did 3 main interviews. And it gives you the opportunity, I think, to then say, oh, I'll approach, in this case, Brian Mannix, Henry Wagons, Marcy Jones, and ask them to, if they'll acquiesce to an interview. And they said yes. So that's exciting that you get to, approach these people and they're usually quite happy to get involved. And you then just work steadily through with a lot of support to create this finished piece that represents your vision. So it's very, very rewarding. And Danny, what did you want me to run through? I can show you this. This is the final piece. So it ended up here, and you even create this imagery here. You're supported in creating this, and there's so many resources out there that you can use to sort of learn Adobe Audition or learn everything you need. I think that's one of the most exciting parts, is that it's in a digital age, and this gets quite meta because I'm talking about digital change to music, but it's changed producing so much so that you can create this from start to finish on your own with this support.
I guess if I was going to want to find out anything about it, it would be sort of the piece that you had in mind when you first sort of thought it up. How closely did the final product reflect that?
It reflected the core sort of story of what I had in mind, and it changes along the way. Some parts work, some parts don't. And there's one in particular, one part I love that was my mentor's idea, because my beginning was really lackluster. It was just my narration. And I think that's the weakest part of the whole piece, and that's not how you want to start a piece. And then my mentor really unblocked that and said, take this one bit, start with it, start with your strongest voice. And that changed it. So it was shifting along the way. And I think other people's might have changed a lot or a little. Maybe someone, some talent wasn't available or something. So the core often stays the same, but you sort of roll with the punches.
And so you've stated that it made you more proficient in using Adobe Audition, and presumably that meant you were sort of more proficient in other forms of digital audio editing.
Definitely. And
sorry, go on.
I think it's just really exciting because you'll come across problems, and all you have to do is, Google it, talk to someone, ask a question, ask the other people are really good resources as well. Everyone else, as part of the NFDS, they're all going through the same thing you are. So I thought that the training we all did together was really useful as well. You come across these problems and then you solve them as you go. So the accumulation of what you learn is incredible, but it only feels like a small bit at a time.
And I guess what you've learned, you've been able to apply that to other aspects of your broadcasting too.
Oh, absolutely. And my sister even says, she's like, oh, you think like a producer now? Because I'll look for the angle, or I'll look for the, the sound bite, or what would make a good story. So absolutely.
Oh, wow. Is there any other sort of major things from the experience that have made it so rewarding for you?
Literally all of it. I couldn't emphasize more. Just even if you doubt yourself or you're not sure about certain parts, or if you'd be able to do it, I'd say just go for it, because your voices are needed in community radio. Community radio is such an amazing place to get these stories that wouldn't be heard elsewhere. That just try it. I put my application in not thinking it would get in. I was so excited when it got in. And then you learn what you need along the way. So I'd say just go for it. It's an amazing experience.
Excellent. Thanks so much for that. Now, Simon Finch, who is another producer here, I think he might sort of be offline at the moment. Simon, I'm going to turn your microphone on. Hopefully you're not sort of in a position where that can't be there at the moment. Oh, he's self-muted at the moment. Simon, if you're there at the moment, fire us off a quick message, because we'd obviously like to hear how you're going. But I do understand that this evening's session, that's Simon from Pulse 94.7, but he's also getting busy at a station event. I'm not seeing anything there from Simon at the moment. So what I might do, Andrew, I note that you've been answering a few of the questions there in the chat box while we've been talking. I'll give you the microphone again so you can keep on going with it, and I'll also give you control of the floor. Your mic's on now, mate, and I will make you the presenter. And so that'll be yours. You'll be able to keep going with what you're doing. And Karen, I'll leave you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Danny. And Karen, that was amazing to hear. Thanks so much for actually preparing and showing the session there to everyone as a kind of idea of, what someone might end up with. As you said, you might have been a bit perplexed seeing that at the start and of the course, but you really came through with it at the end. And of course, I'll be looking at quite a bit of Karena's application and some of the sounds that were kind of used, and the ideas and how they kind of evolved in that piece. So really check out Karena's piece as well if you haven't already, just as an idea, one idea of what can be submitted and be picked up in the National Features and Documentary Series. What I want to do from here is kind of take everyone through a couple of ideas going into the pitch form and what we might want to see submitted as a pitch to the National Features and Documentary Series 2018. One of the big questions that you should be asking yourself before you put pen to paper is kind of what makes a good story. And that's really the idea of the story, and that's what sits at the heart of the whole project. So what we're aiming to do is to get community radio volunteers to have a chance to create really quality productions that are of a national broadcast standard. By national broadcast standard, that means technical considerations, that means scripting considerations, but it also means the kind of journey, access, the way that listeners are kind of involved, the way that someone who has never heard of this topic might be involved in it and become engaged in it. And that is actually some of the feedback that we get from some of the pieces year to year. A good story is one that captures your audience's attention, holds onto it, and gives them something they may not have heard before, but it also gives them a time to absorb information. That time is something that a lot of people kind of struggle to learn or think that they have to cut out all the silences in an interview, for example, to cram it full of information. But then a lot of that timing is lost. So as much as a good, well-edited interview is important, it's also about the rhythm and pacing of the piece that really starts to convey that information as well. So winners from previous years did this in different ways. So you have our 4 previous year winners listed there. What we talk about when we talk about music by Maddie McFarlane in 2014. I, the Many, We, the One by Sue Reese in 2015. In Search of Silence by Michael Schubert in 2016, and of course, Karana, How Digital Changed Music last year. So if you only have time to listen to a couple of previous entries, why don't you go back and listen to those there as a kind of indicative idea of what we might be looking for in a good story. There's all those dot points there as well. This PowerPoint's going to be available afterwards, so you can come back to that and kind of think about your application. Have I conveyed focus? Is there intimacy in the piece? Is there a chance for sound design? Am I taking a listener on a journey? Is there a narrative voice? Is that my voice? Is that someone else's? Do I have a friend who I'm going to get to be the narrator? Is that going to be an interviewee who I'm going to make the narrator? How is this engaging? Is it engaging for just me, or is it engaging for a few other people? And I know it's engaging for other people, because why would I be putting an application together? Just kind of demonstrating that engagement and how you want to bring people in. Rhythm and pace, as I just mentioned there, not over editing all the silence out of an interview. Is your curiosity satisfied? Have you gone on this journey and you found out what you want to find out? For example, I think Karana can talk to that quite well. She had a kind of, embryonic kind of idea of what she wanted to find out in the digital music production industry landscape, but it was something else when she really got through the interviews and started speaking with industry professionals. And dramatic arc is something that's quite hard to kind of piece together, but that's something that's really developed in the course. We admit that it's kind of a difficult concept to put down on paper, but if you want to have a go at it, that's fantastic. Dramatic arc, how is this piece going to pull in a listener? Where's it going to take them? Is there going to be a moment of conflict that needs to be resolved in the end? It's really storytelling, and that's what good features and documentaries are, in essence. They're good stories. I just wanted to also iterate with Karana and Simon. Hopefully we can hear from Simon later. They started with strong concept and context, and then they went on a journey of discovery. That's kind of what their pitch was trying to suggest. You as the listener, you want to go on this journey and find these characters that they tell you about. So you're stepping from this person to this person with a reason. You're not just starting in the middle of nowhere, but you're kind of getting involved and knowing why we're going to be speaking with this person, we're going to be going to this organization, we're going to be knocking on this door. So they both put themselves in their documentaries as a character, in effect. Karana certainly did this, and Simon certainly did this in his documentary Disconnected States, where he realized being in this RSL in Geelong, he was coming into contact with these other people who were dealing with the same community in a different way, but they actually had long-lost kind of contacts themselves. So it was kind of a transparent kind of story in that way, because they're putting themselves center but not front, and it really kind of personalized that listen as well. So how to make a pitch. This is something that is kind of difficult year to year to make it for everyone to be able to argue why you think this idea that you have in your head needs to be heard and needs to be kind of elaborated on, and why it needs to be turned into a national feature fit for national distribution. So here's a couple of quick ideas that hopefully you can kind of consider as you start to pencil out some of your thoughts into the job form. So a pitch should inspire, entice, and excite an executive producer to take your story on and share it with an audience. So it might be in your head, but how original is it? How interesting is it to a stranger? Can you grab someone at dinner over the family dinner table, or call up your parent or an old friend and kind of quickly tell them this idea and find out why it's interesting? Get them to ask you why it's interesting, why you think it should be turned into a national feature. You need to convince the executive producer that you have the skills and the contacts to make the program. So this is really important in the pitch process. We want to see firm names and ideas, not vague wish lists. For example, we don't want to hear that I want to talk to this family who lives in this local area and is part of this community. Well, how are you going to find that family? Have you made any progress to kind of contact them? Have you contacted that organization? But what is the strongest thing to see on an application form is this is the family, these are the people, this is why I'm speaking to them. That's what we want to see. Be certain where possible. We understand that you can only put so much planning in and you might not be able to firm everything up, but hey, be honest with us. Show us the work that you have done. Demonstrate that you can interview these people. You're going to back up your idea and sell it to create interest. So you're going to back up your experience, your skills and ability to interview who you need to interview. And you're also going to be developing your idea more deeply, anticipating problems and barriers that you might come across. So be honest, really, in this application form. Be honest with what you know that you can do and what you want to do, what you want to get out of the course to help you do. Propose some solutions to those problems where you've identified them. For example, you might be concerned that you are going to need a bit of legal advice and you're not sure on the kind of legal parameters of some of these ideas. Well, be honest with that. That's something that throughout the course we might be able to help with and make sure that you have something that is legally fit for distribution if that's a concern. So planning the pitch, there's a few good elements. What's the story idea? This kind of sounds quite prosaic and obvious, but really if you can't put that story idea in a couple of sentences, then it kind of needs to be reworked. Sometimes we can have applications where we think we know the story idea, but it hasn't really been clearly enunciated to us. So hand it to a friend, hand it to a family member before you submit it. Ask them, do you know what it is that I want to do in this documentary? And if they can read it and tell you yes, then hey, I think you've got your story idea there. Why would this make a good radio program for the intended audience? So you are letting us know what the intended audience is, but you're also letting us know why it's fit for them, why it's good, what they're going to get out of it, what it's bringing to the table. Is this a new conversation? Is this an ongoing one? Is there a voice here or a person or a group of people or a community that's been overlooked and you're bringing them into this conversation because that's urgently needed? This is what you're kind of demonstrating in the pitch. Whose voices will be heard and why? Again, just to reiterate that point, if you can firm up who you're speaking with, if you can name context, that's always a lot better than offering some vagaries and some complete hopefulness. If you're just naming a family or an individual, tell us who that family, tell us who that individual is. What role will you play in the program? Are you going to be a narrator? Are you going to be using some kind of narration? Are you going to be an interviewee yourself of sorts? Are you going to be an actor, a voice actor portraying someone else? Are you going to be naming yourself? Are you going to be, hey, I'm Andrew McClellan and I was walking down the street today and I bumped into this person and this happened to me? Or am I going to be in more of the position of, I was walking down the street, this happened to me? I'm kind of nameless and in third person in the background. Sorry, that wasn't a good third person example there. I admit that was first person. Okay, third person. I'll have to remember that for next year's webinar. What other types of sounds are you going to use and why? This is about creative audio, so we want you to be thinking about music, sound that you're going to be using, location recordings, where you're going to be taking your microphone and recorders. Are you going to take them into busy nightclubs? Are you going to take them under underpasses? Is there like a specific historical sound that you want? Do you need to go access a library or access a historical archive to pick up different sounds to use? Are there going to be costs involved? We're not asking for a detailed budget in your application process, but be upfront. I think that I could really use some help to get to this person because this is what's going to make the documentary and feature absolutely sing. Be honest about it in your application form. What experience do you have in radio production? Again, please be honest here. We're specifically interested in the amount of technical experience that you may have because you are going to be doing a lot of editing. You are going to be using a lot of radio editing software. We kind of just want to know what your level is. and really importantly, what's inspiring you? So if anyone has applied in previous years, we haven't asked this question, but we are asking it this year. We want to know what you've been listening to, what other radio or podcasts or other audio you've been listening to that you think, this is fantastic, this is what I actually want to kind of emulate or replicate or kind of use as a source of inspiration as I'm putting my documentary together. This is how I think it could sound. We want you to provide a link here if possible, or a really direct, name a specific podcast or radio show, and let us know what it is about that podcast or radio show that you think could find an emulation within your feature. And so think about these elements, speak it through with a friend, speak it through with a family member. We're also here to help workshop ideas, so feel free to give us a call during business hours or send us an email. We'll have that information at the end of the webinar as well. We're also able to take a few questions here. We probably can't get too involved to really work out and digest and unpack a whole idea, but if you have a quick little question, feel free to pop it in the chat window there. I want to just quickly show you the application form now. Here's one I prepared earlier in case you haven't seen it before. This is the application form that you'll be filling out yourself. You're telling us a bit about yourself. As mentioned, you have to get the name of a station program coordinator or similar, someone at your station. You need to tell them that you're applying for this work. And we actually do ask you if you have discussed your idea with them as well. So that's always there as well. This is where we're asking for your amount of technical experience. This is where you're really describing your idea. Again, you can use bullet points here if you want, but we do want you to take us on a bit of a journey, and we'll show you a good example of that with Karena's application form next. Who are the main characters? Who's going to be interviewed? Are there alternative interviews that you can think about? We want to kind of see your planning here, so that if all your documentary really rests on one interviewee, are you definitely going to get them? What if they're not available? What if something tragic kind of happens, God forbid? Is there some other way that you can make this documentary without relying really on this, the presence and the cooperation of a single individual? Are there other sources of information you can use? Is there ABS statistics? Are there historical archives? Is there a news source? Are there current affairs materials that you might be able to access? Is there an expert in a field? Is there a lecturer at a university? Is there someone you can call on like that? And also you're kind of describing the audience that you have in mind for it. This is where we want to know how you want this to sound. This is where we want to know what you're inspired by, what you've been listening to, what you think you might want to emulate, or just at least use as a reference point within your feature. We ask only mandatory for one, but if you have two ideas, we'd love to hear them. And we also want to know what sounds you're going to be using to tell the story. Here we just have a bit about your commitment. So I stressed that quite a bit at the start of the webinar here, but please do have a good read of what is required of you if you're a successful applicant, because we want to make this as good as possible. This is about making your excellent idea into a really wonderful feature, and we want to make sure that you have the time to be able to do that with us, and to be able to spend with your mentor, with your supervising producer. Okay, back to planning your pitch. Whoops, don't want to do that. I want to just go from this point here. Hey, how do I just hit play from there? Danny, I don't use PowerPoint all enough. Oh, mate, I am freaking out. I'm just going to skip. Yeah, I'm just skipping the room. Sorry, everyone. You know what I was saying before about, having a few breaks and thinking about the rhythm and pacing, not just filling someone with information. That's my demonstration of that there. So hopefully you've been able to absorb that information that I've told you so far. Okay, writing your pitch, demonstrate quite a bit of this. You take us, the reader, on the journey. Tell us the story. What is that story? We'll have a good example of that shortly. Have a clear and logical structure. You might even be suggesting parts to the feature. Hook in your audience on paper and explain to them why the story is so important to the audience. So sure, this might be an interesting story, but why is it relevant? What is the broader theme behind this? Can you point to something that's happening in the media, a conversation that's overlooked, an element of a story that just isn't represented in other media at the moment? Describe to us how it'll sound. How are you going to be making creative use of audio? What do you want to record? What things have you been listening to? Sell yourself and your skills. So you might not have technical skills. You might not have interviewing skills. There might be a whole series of things that you've never done before, but you want to try for the first time. Just let us know. Be honest. Tell us what you want to get out of it. Tell us what you want to do, and tell us what you need from the course to be able to take you to that level. But we need you to be naming what you want to hear and what you want to do first. Give specific people and organizations, so avoid being vague. Just want to come back to this point here. Want you to demonstrate your planning as much as possible. We just saw the pitch form, and it asks these questions. So what's going to make the story interesting? Who are the main characters of your story? Who are you going to be interviewing? What sources of information are you going to be using? How are you going to use sound to tell the story? I hope that's clear enough. I thought at this stage we should go through a sample pitch form, and I hope, Karina, you don't mind, but I've actually called on your application form from last year, How Digital Changed Music. So this is these. I couldn't include all the text that Karina wrote. A lot of it was fantastic, but it might take us a bit too long to get through. So I'll just read out. These were the first 3 paragraphs of Karina's pitch. Music must change, sang The Who in 1978, and now it's changing more quickly than many of us know. The Who sang that line to tape and distributed it on a vinyl record, but today I'm listening to it as an MP4 file streaming to my laptop. So how is music shifting in a digital age? How can Australians who've made it across different eras of music technology, from the age of 45 to CDs and now with Bandcamp and SoundCloud, tell us about what's happening to musicians and listeners? So that's a fantastic pitch, because there's a couple of elements that are already being sold to us now. We have a very clear idea of the topic, so it's going to be about music and its digitization. We have an idea that it's about the changing nature of music, so it's the kind of changing mode of consumption and production. It's Karina's story as well, because it's her that's listening to it as an MP4 streaming to her laptop that was originally sung as a line to tape and distributed on a final record. We have a question. We have kind of something that wants to be probed within the feature and probed throughout interviews and other vital pieces of information in the feature. And we also have a kind of localization. What can Australians who've made music across different eras of music technology? So we have kind of, we're starting to even now bottle down to who we're going to be hearing from, what's going to be responding to, the kind of nature of that conversation. And we've got a couple of sounds already going on in our head. I know this is a music documentary, so it's easier for the sound to kind of be imparted in the head. And, with some other topics, that's not as easy. But already 45 CDs, Bandcamp and SoundCloud, where we already have something kind of sound related, sonic kind of happening in our head as readers. Why is the story interesting? Karina argued this point really, really well. So she led it with the question, if a computer software became responsible for choosing the music you'd listen to, you want to know more, right? Right, I probably would. Would I? I think so. There's now a generation of people who could have never heard music in a physical format, while there are retro fetishists who hold out to change. So already, that's an idea. Wow, there's this whole generation that has been brought up post-Napster that, have probably ostensibly never had the need to play a CD or a tape or a vinyl record if they've always had a computer or an iPod and streaming software available to them. The perspectives of musicians help explore the implications of the changing rules of music production and consumption. Okay, great. I kind of have an idea of who those interviewees are now, or who Karen might be speaking with. Regardless of musical taste, the digital upheaval affects anyone who listens to music, and few people outside of the industry would be aware of the unexpected repercussions and shifts. Fantastic. You know, here's, so we're starting with a niche kind of topic in a way, maybe just speaking with like musicians and producers, but here we suddenly have this broadness, so it affects anyone who listens to music. We have an idea of the possible range of audience members that there could be for this feature. And we also know what it's doing differently. Few people outside of the industry would be aware of the unexpected repercussions. So there's kind of a knowledge base there that Karen wants to represent within a feature form and convey that from her interviewees to her audience. So how do these changes affect the music you love? Well, that's kind of a nice sentence to finish on. Characters and sources. This feature will be the personal perspectives of artists and industry professionals at the coalface of digital disruption. I will interview key Australian artists and industry veterans, really setting it out. So, you know, Karen could have been vague here, but no, she named the artists that she wanted to interview. They're going to be the Favs and Henry Wagons. Okay, cool. And the industry will be represented by manager and booking agent Pat Dells and possibly Jeff Jenkins. Okay, we've got names, we've got contacts, we know the people that could be you know, called on as interviewees. And we've also got a backup there as well. And most importantly, Karen has been honest there, possibly Jeff Jenkins. You know, that it might not be possible to get them, but it's on the wish list. There's also supporting objective data that could be secured from these following sources. So that was really helpful there. It demonstrates that Karen has already thought about some of the major institutions and places that she could be taking information from to add weight, credibility, and professionalism, for lack of a better term, to her feature. How are you going to use sound to tell the story? This is something Karen did really well. Sounds of relatively obsolete formats. For example, a record skipping when it's finished, the calibrating sound played at the beginning of the cassette. These are sounds that are already starting to enter the reader's head. And as a reader kind of assessing this application, we're already like, oh, this is what they're kind of thinking about. I can almost hear this feature, this documentary being played out to me. I can hear what I think I want to hear. I can hear what I want to hear come out of this feature. There's also an explainer there. They're just subtle reminders of the sounds that were once a part of everyday life. Great, that's the rationale. That's why that sound's there. Historical audio demonstrations, layered sound elements. So this sounds a bit vague, but this is Karen kind of hinting at the creative use of audio that she wants to get to. You know, something that conveys all these numbers and statistics that she feels she's going to be using in her end result. How's all that kind of information that otherwise just sounds like a bunch of numbers on radio going to be meaningfully conveyed creatively to an audience member so that it's absorbed? Possible cover versions of the Who's Music Must Change. That didn't happen. I'm a bit disappointed that didn't happen, Karina, but I forgive you. And then there's just a little explainer there. Overall, the sound design would support the unfolding narrative, provide a context and personality for an engaging listen. We think so too. So that's kind of how the pitch can look and how we might see your idea written on paper. As mentioned before, we're happy to workshop some ideas before you put them in as an application to the National Features and Documentary Series for 2018. There's a couple of further resources that we will send after this webinar as well on email. One really important one is the Quick Guide to Pitching a Story. That's a resource put together by the Community Media and Training Organization. So have a good little look at that. And Ira Glass on storytelling. We admit that Ira Glass's style, the NPR, This American Life kind of style of narration is kind of seems to kind of dominate a lot of podcasting in ways that people think about creative audio. So, you know, take that with a grain of salt. So if glass is your kind of thing, it could be worth checking out this resource as well. If not, well, I think you know what you want to listen to. Okay, well, Danny, I think that's it from me. And I see there's a couple of questions there, so I might get to answering those in that chat window.
I can ask those questions for you if you'd like, mate. And apologies to everyone out there in the audience if there's any sort of delay effect or anything happening. This has been part of Andrew and I have been planning this delay effect for weeks now. We wanted to get some sort of crazy feedback loop happening to let you all know that we know about audio. But yeah, we'll just get the delay effect again. Louise Crothers asks, can you pitch 2 ideas or only 1?
Yes, you can pitch 2. We usually prefer that you put just effort into 1 pitch to really make it as good as can be, but we're happy to receive 2 pitches. We prefer that you kind of keep it to that and really make sure that they're very different ideas if you feel the need that you have to put in 2 pitches. Please don't try and put 2 slants on a very similar idea.
Oh, sorry, I've got to turn my mic on before I speak into it. Gemma Purvis asks, how many docos get chosen each year?
Oh, yes, sorry, that's pretty important. I didn't actually cover that. So there used to be 12 applications that were picked up each year. Starting last year, there's just 8. So that means that more resources can be more intensely put towards those select 8 that go through the application process. Also, forgot to mention another key change that's different to last year. If you've spoken with a former NFDS applicant and participant, is that there will be no June all-in weekend where all the participants come to Sydney and meet one another. That's in lieu of more chance to meet up with your mentor in a face-to-face scenario. So that's where the budget has been allocated instead.
Excellent, mate. Thanks very much for that. Devana asks, I've forgotten the second half of her question. It's in regards to, is it all right for the piece to include small audio sections in other languages, with the main sort of meat of the documentary being in English?
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, a couple of years ago, there were a couple of docos that did do this, where, of course, it's an English context language, but other language was used. And the way that translation is approached of that acceptable audio is a creative endeavor as well. It could be a straight translation, the style that you'd hear used in current affairs, or in other cases, it might be something else entirely. It might be the use of creative sound around that voice to act as the translating mechanism.
Excellent. I noticed that you answered a couple of questions before in the text box. Ros Elliott asks, is it possible for 2 people to do this together from a station? You said that's fine for people to work together for a team, but there's budget items that need to be worked out if the application is successful?
Yes, that's true.
Toby Halligan asks, do you mind giving us examples of really common topics? And you suggested that there's something to keep in mind is that the more specific a story is, the less common it will appear, and to have a check through the previous year's entry. So I guess there's no such thing as common in community radio, is there?
No, there's not too many common things. Sorry, I think that may have been, Toby may have been responding to something I said earlier where we did receive a couple of applications around a similar topic last year. Most of them were pretty good applications. Ultimately, we can only go with 1 applicant around that topic instead of having 2 or 3 features around similar things, and it meant that they were the strongest applicant. But as for a kind of application that is put in or is put up for topic every year, there isn't really something that we see every year that we would wish anyone to stray away from.
Excellent. And there was a question, roughly how many applications are you expecting?
Roughly about 40.
Oh, nice. I don't think you'd be able to answer that. You've proven me wrong. And question from me, mate. You were talking before about encouraging people to listen to radio that inspires them as a way to gear themselves up for for the National Features and Documentary Series. What's some radio or audio that's been inspiring you, mate?
Oh, where do I start? Look, there's amazing things that are coming through the Australian community radio sector all the time. It's hard to kind of pick a single thing, but for example, if I want to be hearing something that is kind of pure storytelling, it's not bad to check out All the Best on FBI Radio. That's also produced in a consortium with a couple of other stations. There's fantastic storytelling happening there each week. At 2SER, there's the Think series, and they're fantastic examples of creating a story and creating narration out of what can otherwise be, a potentially dry topic, and kind of getting to the heart of the subject matter at hand through a personal anecdote, for example.
Excellent, mate. Sorry to put you on the spot. I hope you don't mind me doing that, and I'm sure you've got plenty of other examples that we can send to people. The conclusion of this webinar, Ros Elliott asked if the questions and answers that we've been discussing will be available in a text format. Ros, I will get to work on seeing if I can facilitate that. Certainly we'll be sending everyone who registered for the event, and of course tonight's attendees, a recording of the session. There'll be other materials that we'll send as well. Andrew referred to quite a few links as part of his presentation, and we'll send you all those separately as well. Those will be sent to the email address that you used to register for the webinar with. I don't think I'm seeing any more questions in there, so I'm going to wrap it on up there. Andrew, thank you so much for presenting here this evening. It's absolutely wonderful stuff.
Thank you, Danny.
Not that I would have expected anything less from you. He's an absolute bloody pleasure, this Andrew, to work with. You couldn't ask for a nicer co-worker. Don't ask him his opinion on his co-workers, because I'm one of them. I can't handle the truth. Our next webinar is coming up. We've got The Smell of an Oily Rag, 10 Tips for Broadcasting on a Budget. That's going to take place in a fortnight from now, Wednesday, 28th of March, where you'll be able to get tips from other stations on how to keep on providing that quality service with limited resources. And another sort of CRN-focused one, if you will, taking place in a month's time on Wednesday, 18th of April 2018, how to pitch your story to a national current affairs program. And that's in regards to the flagship national program for the community radio sector since 2004, The Wire. Independent news and current affairs with The Wire. It's a great show. Thanks very much, everyone, for attending. Thanks again, Andrew, for presenting. On behalf of the CBAA and, of course, our friends at the Community Media Training Organisation, thanks for joining us. We hope to see you again in the webinars really soon. With any luck, when I close on out of this, it'll ask you a few questions about how you found this evening's session and future webinars that you might like to see. If I've buggered that up in any way, I guess I'm just going to have to send you that recording a little bit later on. But you guys all have a great night. I'll see you at a webinar in your town real soon.